Well, the ongoing battle for the Supreme Court, which started off, Friday night when Ginsburg died, it's heating up and moving along. We just heard that Romney is going to support a vote on the floor of the Senate to confirm a new justice before the election. Cory Gardner of Colorado also saying that he is going to vote in favor of this. And so the only two no's amongst Republicans, the people saying that there should not be a vote, are Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. And so that means that there are 51 senators in favor, as far as we know, of approving a new justice nominated by President Trump. Now, a lot of people are surprised by all this, and I'm not. Not in the least. I'm not surprised that they were able to get to 51 votes. And even with the 51 votes, they can still lose one more vote and get this through by having Mike Pence break the tie. But I think that, with Cory Gardner, it's not shocking they got him on board, because Gardner, they were saying, oh, well, Gardner's vulnerable because it looks like he's going to lose, so he doesn't want to do anything to agitate his voters and cost him the election. So he's going to try and play the middle and say we should wait until after the election to confirm any new justices and see what the results are. But the swamp came to him, and again, sometimes the swamp works in my direction, and I'm not going to get mad at him. And so the swamp came to him and said, you know what, you're going to lose anyway, and if you do lose and Trump gets reelected, we'll just put you in the cabinet somewhere. You'll get a cabinet position. If Trump doesn't get reelected, we'll run you for governor of Colorado. If you lose that, we'll run you again in 6 years for Senate. So no matter what happens, Cory Gardner, you've got a job. Just make sure you vote the right way on this. So Gardner came out and said, yep, we're going to put a pro-life justice on the court. Mitt Romney is a bit of a different story. A lot of people thought, oh my God, Mitt Romney hates Trump so much. Romney wanted Trump impeached. There's no way he's going to vote for this. He's going to be just like Collins and Murkowski and say, nope, we shouldn't vote on a Supreme Court nominee yet. And I was thinking, I don't know if I talked about this on here at all, but I thought that would just be monumentally stupid of Romney to come out and make something like that. And it would be indicative that Romney cares about nothing in politics other than just, being against Trump on everything, even on stuff where he should be, much more in favor of this than Trump himself. Mitt Romney is from the most pro-life state in America, Utah, home of the Latter-day Saints Church. These are people who, don't drink alcohol, let alone believe in baby murder. And these are the people who elected Mitt Romney. So it would be a total slap in the face to them if somehow to own Trump, who, the Mormons don't like because Trump is not a very good Christian. It's a bit of an understatement, but that's why the Mormons generally don't like Trump. If they elected Romney, and then he went to Washington and said, Trump wants to put this person who, might just vote to overturn Roe v. Wade, which is, a decision considered to be, one of the most, demonic things ever sanctioned by the U.S. government. If Romney somehow came out in opposition to that justice, just to spite Trump, I mean, that would be cutting off your nose to spite your face, to say the very least. So I thought that there was a good chance that Romney would come around to the right side of this issue, and as of today, he did. They haven't even announced who the justice is going to be, and Mitt Romney's saying, yep, we need to hold the vote, and we're going to do it. So, you've got these slime balls who are just people who I am disgusted by on a personal level: Mitt Romney, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell. But you know what? They're getting it done this time, because this is the one thing that, for some reason, and it's an important issue, but this is the one thing that it seems like the Republicans finally have grown a spine for, is the Supreme Court. I think that the Kavanaugh thing really shook a lot of people up. I don't think the Dems realize how much Kavanaugh backfired. It was enough when they did that to Clarence Thomas. A lot of people, I grew up my whole life, after watching the Anita Hill, confirmation hearings with Clarence Thomas, and thinking wow, the left really, they're not good guys. They don't just disagree with people like me. They want to destroy people like me. And, there were a lot of men on the right who looked at what happened to Clarence Thomas and said, they'd do the exact same thing to me if I were in his shoes. And then they did it again to Kavanaugh, the exact same thing, except times 10 worse, saying that he was a gang rapist, a serial rapist. Not just that he, made lewd comments to a woman who, who worked under him in a law firm or something, which is what Clarence Thomas was accused of. And so, if people weren't radicalized on, the Supreme Court confirmation process after Clarence Thomas, they definitely were after Brett Kavanaugh. There were a lot of these very, stale conservative Republicans who, after the Kavanaugh thing, finally figured out that, hey, we're not just squabbling in Washington over mere disagreements. And I think that it is because of the horrors of the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings that gave a lot of these senators who were generally, very, very in favor of process and don't want to, stir things up and always care about tradition. The Senate is a country club. Those Kavanaugh hearings, they gave these guys the gumption they need to say, you know what, no, we're not going through that again. We're not going to be bamboozled. We're going to get this done. The president's going to nominate a good person, and we're going to confirm them, and we don't give a damn what anybody says about it. And the Supreme Court is something that really, unites the Republican Party. There's not too many things that do unite the Republican Party. Republicans, have, just like the Democrats, they don't have, there's no logic to their party ideology. There are lots of people within both of the parties who, care about a couple of different issues and then might disagree on all the other issues that the party stands for. I'll give you a good example. Like, I'm big on guns. Guns are very important to me because I think that, if you lose the Second Amendment, then everything else goes out the window. Other people are really big on abortion, and that goes both ways. There are people in the Democrat Party who are big against guns. There are people who are big pro-abortion. Then you have people in the Republican Party who are big pro-life people or big pro-gun or whatever. And those two positions don't necessarily go with each other. You can be anti-abortion and anti-gun, and you can be pro-abortion and pro-gun. But this is just how things go up. But when it comes to a Supreme Court nominee, because that handles so many different things, that really nominates people. And the Supreme Court, to me, comes down to those two issues, abortion and guns. And so whether you are, a pro-gun person or a pro-life person, if you're someone who's on the right, you have a big reason to be energized by the Republicans putting forth a conservative justice to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who has been, one of the biggest boogeymen, for the right for at least my entire lifetime. My time growing up, in America, in right-wing media and stuff, Ginsburg was always one of the biggest villains. Now, the other thing that we're finding out is we're getting more and more leaks. It seems like, early over the weekend, people were thinking it was going to be more the Barbara Legault woman, just because she had extra identity politics points. I wasn't particularly thrilled about that because she doesn't have a very long record, on constitutional matters at all, because she's, been a federal judge for like less than a year, I think. And so I was not too happy about that, but now it seems like the consensus is shifting that Trump's going to go with Amy Coney Barrett because they just met in person, and we're hearing more about her, sort of under the table than the Legault woman. So it seems like Trump's going to go with Barrett. That to me is a best case scenario. I actually was hoping when Kennedy resigned and retired earlier, that they were going to go with Barrett because after Gorsuch and my priority would have been, hey, if I've got another Supreme Court, seat to fill, I want to fill it with someone who's, going to be as good as possible. Kavanaugh, I was much less optimistic about, although Kavanaugh is supposed to be really solid on guns, which is my number one thing, even though he's terrible on the surveillance state and the Fourth Amendment and stuff like that. But Barrett, is supposed to be someone who's at least as good as Scalia, and I didn't think Scalia was great. I'm kind of biased against Scalia because he made a comment about the incorporation doctrine, which is something that I absolutely abhor. I think that it is one of the worst things that the Supreme Court has has ever invented, because that's what the Supreme Court does. They invent these things, and then it becomes precedent, so it's law. It's one of the examples of the Supreme Court legislating from the bench, and I think it's done a lot to tear this country apart, because it helped chip away at federalism, and I won't get into that here. But let's just say that, Scalia was only an originalist when it came to the Constitution, in certain cases. He picked his battles. And that's exactly what he said about the incorporation doctrine. He said, hey, I believe that the Constitution should be enforced as written, but we're not getting rid of the incorporation doctrine. I mean, that's precedent. That came up in like the 1910s. And so, just because of that, Thomas has always been the guy who I actually consider to be the real hero on the Supreme Court. But I'm sure if I dug deep enough, I could find plenty of things I disagree with him on too. None of these people are going to be perfect in my view. Robert Bork was probably better than both of them, but of course Bork got borked, so we never got to see him as a justice. But Barrett, this woman is supposed to be she's supposed to be a judge of that caliber, in that mold. And only time will tell, of course. But she's 48 years old. And if she gets on and she really is that solid, I mean, being able to replace Ginsburg with someone like that would just be a dream come true. I would feel much safer if some kind of, gun case came before the Supreme Court. I would not worry so much that the Supreme Court is just going to, read the Second Amendment out of existence, like, say, Ginsburg would have done if she was writing an opinion on the Second Amendment. She basically thought that the Second Amendment applied to muskets, and so therefore in the modern age is completely irrelevant and is meaningless. Now, the other issue, something that I touched on, I believe it was on Saturday in my first video discussing the death of Ginsburg, was the Supreme Court's going to be very important in deciding this election, because we're probably going to have, because of all the mail-in ballots, which, my main concern with the mail-in ballots is that a lot of mail-in ballots compared to regular ballots end up getting thrown out because they're improperly filled out, or they're not sent in correctly, or there's just some kind of clerical error made by the voter which ends up getting the vote invalidated. And so when I realize that statistical difference, and then I see, there's projected to be so many more people voting by mail, well, then that means that you're going to have that high percentage of invalidated votes, accounting for, a lot more votes in absolute terms. And so there's going to be a lot of votes getting, compared to an ordinary election, just getting thrown out, and then people were going to see that as illegitimate. Well, there was just an important ruling in Pennsylvania where they said essentially that there's some kind of process in Pennsylvania. I guess you have to mail back your ballot in 2 envelopes. There's one envelope that has, the address and everything and the postage. And then there's another there's another envelope inside there that has your ballot that's totally blank. And that's so that when they open up the ballot, whoever's counting them doesn't see any of your personal information. Well, if you just mail back your ballot in the one envelope that has your name and address and everything on it and all the postage, apparently your ballot's going to get thrown out. And so, what that means is that if neither, Trump nor Biden wins Pennsylvania in a landslide, then one of those two candidates are going to challenge this in the courts and try and, have these ballots counted to see if it makes a difference. And, that will ultimately, probably, that case will work its way up to the Supreme Court. And if you only have 8 people on the Supreme Court, you end up with a tie, and then that decision goes back to a lower court. And this, I thought, would just lead to even more chaos. I mean, this is all quite scary. I'm not usually someone who cares that much about politics or the horse race or stuff like that, or who happens to get elected. But in this case, I don't think the problem is not that I think that this election is so much more important. It's that so many Americans think that this election is so much more important than other elections, to the extent that, if people feel like things are not conducted, above board and, they don't get the results they want, that they will react violently. And so now someone who doesn't think that it will make that big of a difference whether, Donald Trump or Joe Biden happens to be the head of the executive branch, I think that we're generally going to see the government, do the same things over the next 4 years. because so many other people do think that that's important, and will react in violent ways, depending on what happens, I am put in a position to where I very much have to care about what's happening politically, to where I do have to, pay attention to what's going on in the election, because that's going to affect, the real world. In fact, who knows? The unrest might start when this confirmation goes through, not just on election day. In fact, we might be, in a state of ongoing riots when the election occurs. And of course, this will be different than your normal Antifa or BLM riots, which, maybe that means that it won't be as intense, or they won't happen at all. It'll just be sort of, meandering protests, because, it's hard for me to see, your middle-class white liberal types who really care about Ginsburg and care about the Supreme Court, acting in the same way that your BLM Antifa types act. But perhaps those elements, the violent people who care about things like cops or capitalism, will also come out to join, the anti, Amy Coney Barrett protests, and help agitate those and get those people involved in rioting. And of course, if that's the case, what happens on election day if there is rioting in all of these cities on the day of the election? I mean, just think about it. Has anybody considered that, that might be a way of, that might be the source of some voter suppression if people are, physically scared to go out and vote because there are mobs roving the streets? And considering that these mobs tend to form in cities, that might actually hurt the Democrats more than the Republicans. If you have the mayors of these smaller towns and suburbs who are going to be a little more right-leaning and a little more pro-police, actively out there dispersing mobs on the election day, making sure that the polling places are secure and safe, then maybe that'll give them a bit of an advantage. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but, well, it's not crazy anymore. I don't think it sounds crazy. I do think that these things are possible, and it's something that has to be continually monitored. You don't just start thinking about these things on the day of the election. What if I go down to vote myself? And, which is, by the way, not something that I often consider doing. That's how much I do think that this year actually matters, just because of the unrest. If it was just about the policies of Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, I probably would just not vote. But anyway, that aside, hey, what if I'm someone who goes down to the polling place and I see a violent Antifa mob outside? Because, you're allowed, at least where I live. People are allowed to wave signs at polling places. If there's a violent mob, intimidating me, maybe I won't pull in. Maybe I won't vote that day. Maybe I'll just stay home. And, will that be enough to affect voter turnout? I don't know, but I mean, we had a trial run of this in Philadelphia in 2008. It was something that got a lot of attention at the time because it scared some people, but it didn't ultimately change the outcome of the election. There were, I think they were Black Panthers standing outside of a polling place in Philadelphia with guns, and, they were just sort of hanging out and, looking around and acting kind of intimidating. What if we see something similar on a more widespread scale across the country? If I were running one of these nonprofit groups that organizes these kinds of protests and organizes a lot of the riots, that's something I would be thinking about and trying to plan. And if that does seriously, affect turnout, just think about all the chaos that will create in terms of the illegitimacy of the election. I mean, there's so much that can go wrong with this election. The situation seems to deteriorate more and more every day. So I think I'll leave it at that. I've kind of been rambling all day today just because, I mean, my head is all over the place. There is so much to be worried about right now. So with that said, if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.